Hello, welcome to election official training for the spring primary election, which will be held on February 15th, 2022. This training has been created for election officials scheduled to work at this election. I'm Janice Moyer, the village clerk for the Village of Menomonee Falls. Today's training will be presented by myself and Deputy Village Clerk Amy Vanderheij.
So the spring primary, February 15th, 2022. Some of the specifics are that there will be only Menomonee Falls School District voters voting. This is due to there's only Menomonee Falls School District candidates on the ballot. We do have a new polling location, which is Fire Station number 3, and we will not be using St. James for this election due to it only having Hamilton voters. Why do we have a new polling place? Because we have done redistricting, which has caused us to have new ward maps. It has shuffled around a few voters to different locations due to us evening out our polling locations. And so the ward numbers may have changed as well. This is a view of the new map. So as you can see, some of the ward boundaries have changed. For this election, there are split wards in Ward 1, 23, and 18. These locations, you will notice, have only Menomonee Falls voters in your poll books, but we'll discuss how to figure out who is a Menomonee Falls and who is a Hamilton voter on the next slide. Here's our new polling places, or with the new wards with our polling places. As you can see, the new Fire Station number 3. So Good Shepherd will have wards 1 through 4, Menomonee Falls Library, wards 5 through 7, Fire Station, wards 8 and 9, Holy Cross, wards 10 through 12. Prince of Peace will have ward 13 and 14. Davians 15 through 18. St. James 19 through 22. And Gloria Day 23 and 24. Our address listings this time will be color coded to help you see who is a Menomonee Falls School District voter versus a Hamilton School District voter. The Menomonee Falls voters will be highlighted in green, and the Hamilton voters are in white. So if somebody comes to register, make sure you're checking your listings to see if they are in the Menomonee Falls district or Hamilton. Again, those split wards will be the ones that need to watch out for these. So voters may need additional help getting to their correct polling places. Why this has happened is because the April, August, and November 2020 elections were held at different polling places. And now with the 2020 redistricting, you could see our ward boundaries have changed. Please help provide these voters with the following things. Use of the address listing, help them find their polling location. You can use the ward maps. 2 of them will be provided to you. And you can also have the voter go on myvote.wi.gov to look up their polling place.
On election day, election officials may not wear political apparel or discuss candidates' politics while working. Please report any concerns that you would have about this to your chief inspector. If you do not work at your specified polling place and wish to vote, you may vote by absentee, either at clerk services, and we're doing in-person absentee voting right now through February 11th at 5 p.m. or request one by mail or online on or before February 10th at myvote.wi.gov. The village will provide some PPE for this election. In all the cases, we have face masks, some protective face shields, hand sanitizer, we have gloves, and we have wipes. We're asking that someone at the polling place, either a chief or a designated election official, put some gloves on and actually wipe the voting booths down occasionally. They don't have to be done after every voter, but if you could do that occasionally, that would help out. Make sure you put gloves on when you're doing that to help keep everyone safe. We encourage all voters and workers to follow CDC guidelines, and we've given you the CDC's website, but masks are not required for our election officials or for anybody coming in to vote at this time. Absentee drop off. There's been a bunch of the information out there. in the news media. And so we wanted to cover that just so you're aware of what we're doing. Voters, first of all, cannot drop off their absentee ballots at the polling places. For we now are processing absentee ballots at Central Count. Central Count will be at Village Hall. What do we do when a voter walks into the polls on election day and they want to drop off their absentee? The answer is that you would direct them to Village Hall. You can give them the address. They can pull that up on a phone, or you could go to the ward map and show them where Village Hall is. They can use the drop box, and that was the one thing I mentioned when I started this slide. There were some court cases, and at first we couldn't use the drop boxes. Now we can use them, but we do close the drop box at 7 p.m. That's out in front of Village Hall. The reason we do that is because we empty at 7 and then we put a note on it and we ask anybody else who wants to drop their ballot off to actually walk in the building and give it to clerk services staff so that we can get that processed and we can get it into the Central Count location and get that ballot counted. But we do accept them up until 8 o'clock. Like I said, they would, after 7, between 7 and 8, they would walk it into to Village Hall and drop it off at the clerk services counter. If there is any change in any of this because of court cases, we definitely would post it on our website for the election inspectors. We also would update our training website, and then we would also communicate that with the chief inspectors so that they could notify you. I do believe everything will stay pretty static, at least through the February election. At least that's the information I've read. So for now, we will use drop boxes up until 7 p.m. Between 7 and 8, drop it off at Village Clerk Services.
Going over the reviewing of the photo ID. So when somebody comes up to the poll book table, you'll review their photo ID. We are looking at the elector's photograph, their name, and the expiration date. Remember, people may or may not be wearing masks. They do not have to pull their mask down unless somebody is wearing a covering where you absolutely cannot see them. Again, we are not checking for addresses. This is what you use when you do a registration. So it can have their old address on it. It must just have a photograph that somewhat reasonably resembles them, the elector's name, and an expiration date must meet the expiration date requirements. Here's another slide just showing some of the acceptable photo IDs. So this gives you some picture ideas of it. The Wisconsin driver's license, US passport book, University and Technical College ID, but that also has to have enrollment verification with it, and things like a certificate of naturalization and more. Here is the proof of identification sheet that we do provide you in the registration table and in your poll books. This shows you all the different types of IDs that can be acceptable. Things such as the state driver's license may be revoked or suspended or unexpired after 11/3 of 2020. Same with the Wisconsin identification card and with the military ID issued by the U.S. Uniform Service. Military ID card issued by the veterans may be expired. Some of these indicate that they are indefinite, so they do not expire. Photo ID cards issued by a Wisconsin accredited university or college or technical college. These do have a few more regulations. The date on the card was issued has to be on there, must have a student's signature, the expiration date no later than 2 years after the date of issuance. So it can be used if expired. And again, it has to have that document that provides enrollment identification, such as a tuition fee receipt, enrollment verification letter, or a class schedule. US passport book or card unexpired or expired after 11/3 of 2020. Same with the certificate of naturalization, unexpired, issued no earlier than 2 years before the election. A DOT driving receipt, so the receipt you get before you actually get your driver's license is acceptable, unexpired, or valid for 45 days from the issue date. Same as the ID receipt. ID card issued by a federally recognized Wisconsin tribe, expired or unexpired. The Wisconsin DMV IDPP receipt, which is a temporary process to get an ID to vote for election day. That is valid for 60 days. And the Wisconsin DMV IDPP receipt convention conventional is valid for 45 days. Citations or notices to revoke or suspend driver's license, unexpired, dated within 60 days of the election. And last, a state Wisconsin identification card, no photograph. This must be unexpired or expired after 11/3 of 2020. If someone comes in with no photo ID, we have to provide them with this document. It is the free ID and identification card petition process. This will be provided in your chief inspector binder. There are many copies there for a chief to give out for someone without a photo identification.
Okay, poll list sample page. This is just a sample of what a poll list looks like when an absentee ballot has been issued or an absentee ballot has been returned. We go to the next slide. What do we do when the notation says absentee issued? Check the absentee ballot log to see if the ballot return date is filled in. Ask the voter if they return their absentee ballot to clerk services. A drop box or mailed the ballot back. If the voter says yes to any of the three, they are not allowed to vote. So if they voted their absentee ballot in clerk services, if they put the ballot in the drop box, or if they put it in the mail, they are not allowed to vote. If the voter says no, you should contact the chief inspector who can verify if the ballot was returned. Typically, the chief will call us and then at clerk services, and then we'll do a little bit more work to make sure that to see if the voter has actually voted or not. So what do you do if the notation says absentee return? That means that the voter cannot vote again. Their absentee ballot was received by clerk services. If the voter feels there's a discrepancy, again, check with the chief inspector. Do not turn the voter away. Let's take care of that while they're waiting, and so that everybody knows what the resolution is to that. Okay, earth movers. Sometimes this shows up on the poll list. You can see the red box that says, have you moved? Where that comes from is what we call an ERIC mover. What is ERIC? It's an acronym for Electronic Registration Information Center. The Wisconsin Election Commission is asking chief inspectors and poll workers to follow steps on election day when checking in a voter at the poll list table. Why is this used? It's used to identify voters who may have moved from their current addresses, and the poll list will look like this if the voter is considered an ERIC mover. If they're still at their current address, that's fine, then they can just vote. And that would be it. So let's go through the schedule or the chart that says what you should do. If they still live at their address, it says have the voter sign the poll list and continue the process like I just mentioned, so they can vote. No, if they've moved and they're not at that address, they would need to complete an election day registration form for their new polling place. And then they would vote at their new polling place. If there's a typo or just some error in the address of the voter, note the address correction on the poll list and don't write over the name or address of the voter. Just make a note in the margin, and then they can continue with the check-in process.
So the ballots for this election will look pretty much the same as every election, but you will see here we have two arrows showing you where you should initial the ballots. So when you give out a ballot, it should be initialed by both of the inspectors, election inspectors at the poll book table. Same with the express vote that's given out, and the chief inspector will help them use that express vote machine. Overvoted ballots. This can happen. There are many people on the ballot this election for the school district. It is a vote for 3. So if somebody were to vote for 4, it would be counted as an overvoted ballot. This is what you would see on the DS200 if there was an overvote, so that you can help somebody fix their ballot. Initialing the ballots. You may not initial the ballot before the voter has checked in at the poll book table. Reasons for this: the Election Commission does not allow this practice. If we do pre-initial ballots, it would leave a live stock of ballots on the table. If we needed to evacuate quickly, these would be live ballots for somebody to take. If 2 ballots are given to a voter by accident, the voter may have 2 live ballots and put both of them into the DS200. We want to try to avoid all of these things. Ballot bagging at the end of election night, we do have to look for write-ins, but we do not have to separate by ward. So you do not have to worry about putting different wards in different ballot bags. They can all go into one single ballot bag per polling place. You may need to use multiple bags if the ballots don't fit in one, but again, you don't have to split them by the wards. There are no registered write-ins as of January 1st or January 31st. If there are any registered write-ins by election day, we will let our chief inspectors be notified of this, and they can help out with that if need be. Any party represented poll workers must sign these ballot bags, and the ballot seal numbers will be written on the chief inspector's statement. Curbside voting. So what happens if somebody comes in and says, oh, I have such and such in the car, we'd like to do curbside voting. The voter can register using curbside voting as well as voting their ballot. What'll happen is the chief inspector, go get the chief inspector. They will announce that there is a curbside voter. They will then take 2 election officials out to the curbside voter, first to check if they're not registered, to help them register, take a election registration form out there and help them register, come back in, make sure you check their photo ID, check them in the poll book after they've been registered, take them back out their ballot, have them vote their ballot the way they need with the sleeve. There should be a sleeve to help you keep everything confidential. Then come back inside with the ballot and announce that you're feeding it into the DS200 machine. The chief inspectors will have additional training on this, so please make sure that they are informed of the process or of the curbside voter and that they help you with this process.
Registration, voter registration. Voters must have lived at their current address in the village at least 28 days before election day. And for this election, that date is January 18th, 2022. Of course, that changes for each election, so we always give you that updated day. If not, then the voter must return to where they previously lived to vote. So we've given you a table that has some examples of a voter situation and where they would go to vote. So I'm going to let you read through those on your own time, but please be aware of that, especially if you are registering voters and you're at the registration table. So other important information. Updated, we have a polling place emergency response plan that we have updated. Please review that before election day. It's changed. We've tried to make it a little easier to read as far as the locations you would go to if there was an emergency, say a weather event or a fire. Active assailant would be something that your chief inspector would give you some information on the day of elections. Remember, absentee ballots cannot be accepted at polling places. If a ballot is walked in, please contact the chief inspector so they can give that person direction on bringing it to Village Hall. And end of day bagging. Remember, poll workers still have to look through ballots for write-ins, and that the ballots do not need to be separated by ward anymore. They can be commingled. Another thing I want to mention is that the ballot actually is just Menominee Falls School District, as Amy mentioned. There are 8 candidates on the ballot. I've received a couple emails from people asking if someone had declined to be a candidate anymore for the school district. There may have been some information out there. That's something that we don't address, and I would ask you not to also at the polls. If someone has done that, it would have been reported maybe to the Menominee Falls School District because that's where those candidates file. We are not aware of that. When the ballots were printed, it was a viable candidate. They had provided all the paperwork they needed to be a candidate. And so if someone has tried to remove their name as a candidate, they would still show up on the ballot. It's a vote for not more than 3, which means They can vote for up to 3, but they could vote for less. So they're not required to vote for 3. They could vote for 1, 2, or 3 candidates. Obviously, they overvote would be a 4 or more. So it would be 3, or excuse me, not more than 3. And there are 8 candidates on the ballot again. Mentioned. That is the end of our training for this specific election. Thank you for reviewing this with us. If you have questions, please email us, and we will get back to you with an answer very quickly. Thanks again.